Views and opinions expressed on this show are solely those of the host and guests and do not express the views or opinions of any of their employers or affiliates.
Hi, I'm RiTika Rose. Welcome to Awaken Your Truth, where I bring conscious dialogues and stories that will help you free your mind, heal your life, and embody your power. I hope to shift your perspective and create deeper understanding of yourself and others. Everyone has a story, everyone has a purpose, every experience has a reason. This show is about engaging with the truth of who you are, discovering your personal power and stepping into your authentic self so you can have more compassion and empathy for yourself and everyone around you. It's time for us to dig deep and learn to see ourselves and others with clarity so that we can come together and create a brighter future for humanity. When we free our minds, we can heal our lives, and this is how we build a powerful, transformed world. Awaken Your Truth starts now. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Awaken Your Truth with me, RiTika Rose, where I share conscious dialogues that free your mind, heal your life, and embody your power. I hope that my show continuously hopes to shift perspective about yourself personally and how you see the world so you can find more joy, peace, and freedom in your life overall. Today, I'm so excited to bring back my spiritual sister, Azure Darby, who you guys will remember from our Christ consciousness conversation exactly a month ago. Actually, oh my gosh, exactly a month ago.
That's so funny.
That was 12/23. It's 1/23 today. So there are no accidents here. Azure and I are always, the numbers are always matching up for us somehow. But today we're going to talk about overcoming challenges and finding freedom in the surrender, which Azure, I think is a really sort of nice piggyback on our conversation about Christ consciousness and about, oneness and being at one with source, and then just sort of bringing this back, into the conversation. But for the audience, just to remind you, Azure is she's been practicing in the field of social work for over 20 years. She's currently a professor at USC teaching students of social work there. She's also a Reiki master, a spiritual teacher, and a student of Tantra. So I'm so excited to have her back and have this conversation with me. And we were laughing a lot before we started recording the show here, because I'm going to be straight up, like, I've had a really challenging couple weeks, and I actually emailed the producer saying, I'm having a really challenging couple weeks. I just don't know what to talk about on my brain. Like, I just don't have the brain power right now. And one of the producers was like, well, Jessica, actually, who's recording today with us, like, well, why don't you just read something from your book? That's always good. And then Azure and I are just having our conversations as we do. And I was just telling her, and then, a lot of conversation was coming up about letting go and surrendering. And just, Azure and I often remind each other, and all of our spiritual brothers and sisters in our lives, just we remind each other, we can forget sometimes, right? When things are feeling challenging, right? Azure, that like we can forget
Absolutely.
to just let go sometimes, and just surrender sometimes. So we're like, well, why don't we just have a show about overcoming challenges and the freedom in surrender? So this is what we're going to be doing today. And I'm also going to be reading from the chapter in my book on detachment, which talks all about surrender. So everything is just sort of blended perfectly together. And I think
lined up.
And it lined up because, one, I was being honest with where I was, and I wasn't, even though I was like, I don't know what to talk about, I wasn't really stressing about it and feeling any control about it. I was just being honest with the producers. I was talking to my friends, and I'm like, I don't know, I know it'll all come together. It'll just come together when I need to record, it will. And then it just sort of did. And that's sort of how surrender works, right? And how like the universe just sort of just works in our favor. And I think it's very timely, just as Azure and I were talking about the show, that we really are still in the first month of this year, and many people may be feeling a lot of challenges going into a new year, as most people usually do. And and so we want to just really help you remember today. So it's like, Okay, when life presents yourself with challenges, right? How are you responding? How do you feel? How do you overcome it? Azure and I today want to remind you, especially through our spiritual teachings that we've done together when we first met 10 years ago, and how we've sort of incorporated that into our lives and into our workspace, into our personal lives, into our social lives, to just help remind you as the audience, that we are spiritual beings having a human experience, very similar to what we spoke about a month ago. And, and helping you, just remember the freedom in the detachment and the surrendering process. So that's what we're really hoping to discuss with it, and just remember our connection with source and how the universe and source is always with us and guiding us, right?
Absolutely.
So anything else you want to add to the intro? I told them before we started, I'm like, oh my gosh, all of a sudden I have so much I want to talk about in this intro, and also
yeah, I think everything you said just it's exactly right. I think the beautiful thing is that we were sort of marrying each other, not exactly so, but in similar ways. And so we were able to sort of come together and go, this is what we need to be sort of thinking about, like you said, and remembering. And also, if we I love you always do that. You will say, well, if we're feeling that, there are definitely other people feeling that. And that's one of the reasons why we decided we wanted to not just have that conversation among sisters, just having our weekly check-in, but also sort of expound on that and share that with other people who may be, wanting support around that too.
Yeah, because we're all going through it. Like, no matter what we are doing in this world and in this life, we're all going through it. I was having a conversation with somebody the other day who was talking about, performance anxiety, like being up in front of people and performing, etc. And, and how she was just feeling the anxiety around that. And I said, look, I have a talk show. I'm on camera every couple of weeks. There's other things that I do as far as, performing or being in front of people or what have you. And I get nervous each time, just being honest, right? It's not like everybody has their challenges and everyone goes through their things. It's just, I think part of it is just acknowledging it, like what you and I were talking about a couple of days ago. It's the first step is acknowledging it.
Absolutely. I feel that way every time. And even when we checked back in around it, that was like the first thing we talked about is we got to just name it, right? Just put it out there that this is what's happening.
And that's sort of
okay.
And that's sort of the first step in allowing the process of surrender to take place. Right. And when I read from my book shortly, it talks about that as well. So Azure, as I was preparing for the show, I brought up there was a few quotes that I found that I wanted to read to you and to the audience. And then I'm going to read from my book as well. And then you and I can sort of expand on the discussion about detachment, if you're okay with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Azure likes, we were talking about this, and I know Azure likes to follow Abraham and Esther Hicks. I found a quote from them. There's a quote from because I got you, girl. And then there's a quote from Buddha. There's a quote from Buddha, which I'll hold until I read from the chapter in my book, because that's actually the beginning of the chapter in my book. Then I have just a reference from the Bible and a reference from an Indian guru called Sadhguru. And there's so many more.
Oh yes, good one.
Yes, there's so many more teachings on detachment that the audience can look through, but these are just a few that I found that I thought were good. So, from the Bible, God knows exactly how much we can bear. Therefore, he may remove someone or something from your life in order to protect you. Right. And we'll get into that more as I read from the chapter with it. Just sit with that for a moment for the audience. So that's really, really important, right? Because we can be attached to so many things, but our higher beings and our guides often know better for us, right? The universe is always like a few, if not many steps ahead of us. We just have to remember that. Yep, that part. But we tend to forget that sometimes, right?
We do.
Because we're sitting in our human experience. And that's why we want to remind ourselves and everybody else that we're spiritual beings having a human experience. So when we're sitting in the humanness, we tend to forget some of these things, right? A quote from Sadhguru is, "A detachment does not mean non-involvement. You can be deeply involved, but not entangled."
Oh,
that's powerful, right?
Ooh.
Yes. You don't need to be caught up in it. You can be involved in it, but you don't have to wrap yourself around that situation, right? Be there, take the steps that you need to. And again, we'll get it. My chapter talks all about that, but you don't need to be all wrapped up and entangled in it, right?
Yes.
Abraham Hicks. detach from to allow in.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I know you probably love
Mm-hmm.
that one, right? Because when we're
Mm-hmm.
so stuck on something in controlling it, and it has to happen this way, or it has to happen my way, or it has to happen the way that other people are expecting of me or of it, or etc., right? We
Right.
get caught up in that, but maybe that's not the way that it's supposed to be, right? So if we just
That's right.
let go a little bit and release those reins, and just like Sadhguru said, we can be involved in it, but not entangled in it. And then, as
Mm-hmm.
Abraham Hicks says, then we can allow it in the way that it's really supposed to be. Right? I love how all these
Mm-hmm.
quotes just sort of blended together. You
Look
know,
what you did there.
right? Because what the Bible says too is God knows exactly how much we can bear. Right? So they're ahead of us, right? And being a spiritual being, well, we'll get into that a little. Actually, I don't want to jump again, but I was going to. We'll get into this a little bit. But we have contracts before we came down here, and Azure, you and I can both
speak.
I'm jumping ahead, but that's my brain is working that way right now. But we'll get into that later on in the show, right? But so, what do you think about those quotes so far before I jump into my chapter?
I love them, and the second one that you shared, it's definitely one that definitely resonates with me, and also following along with Abraham Hicks. They speak about the fact that through our experiences, the universe knows us so well and knows what we desire on a deeper level than we can. And so, like you said, we can absolutely be involved with this, and we're going to talk about that co-creation piece, but also trusting that the universe, that level of intelligence, knows us so well that really the surrendering is allowing it to come to us better than we can even imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So the surrender even allows it to come to us, beyond what we are thinking we want, how we want it, or the way we want it to show up. So even that makes it, far more of a gift if we allow ourselves to surrender and just let it come to us. Right.
Yeah, and we're gonna dive in deeper about Azure, we understand how hard it is to trust.
Trust that we understand that.
Yes, to trust in the surrender. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. But before we go to commercial break, I'm just going to read from the chapter of detachment from my book. And everybody, during the commercial break, you will see a commercial of how you can purchase my book. It's on Amazon, called Tagged Your It, Become the Leader of Your Own Life. And part of becoming the leader of your own life is this process of letting go and detaching to find your own peace, right? So here we go. Detachment. The root of suffering is attachment. Buddha. Let it go. What is detachment? It is the practice of letting go of an attachment to something, someone, or a situation. This is really the process of surrendering to the divine and trusting life to flow the way it's supposed to flow. Because when we try and control something, or when we are expecting something to happen in a certain way, we actually block the flow of how it's actually supposed to be done, or how it's actually supposed to be created, and in the time that it's supposed to be created.
That part.
The moment we put worry, expectation, or controlling energy on it, the process slows itself down. When we start to trust and accept that all things are being done for our higher good, we then start to let go and allow the flow. I say, when we put expectation on something, we block the flow of what is meant to be from actually happening. The moment we let go, we return to peace, release any pressure or anxiety towards it, and that's when the magic and manifestation start to happen. Detaching from people, situations, or experiences are also an important practice. Once the learning and growth has reached its mark, it may not be something, someone, or an experience we need to have anymore. If we lose something or someone, or a situation or relationship has ended, be thankful for what you have gained from it, how it has served you, how you have served it, and how you have served it, and be ready and excited for the next experiences coming your way, because you now can be open to bigger and better experiences and growth.
Amen.
So yeah, thank you. That was helpful. Hopefully that was helpful to the audience to hear. We are going to go to break now, but when we return, we're going to talk about what are the different forms of attachment. Why do people experience attachment? personally, professionally, on a social level. And hopefully some of the tips we just talked about have supported you in this first part of the show, but we'll dive in deeper in a little bit. So if you're more interested in reading more about becoming the leader of your own life, please purchase my book on Amazon, and also follow the link at RiTikaRose.com for a free consultation call for coaching with me. We'll be back soon. Thank you so much.
If we could help you transcend your post-traumatic stress experience without drugs, grow in awareness of why you're suffering the experience, and offer you a solid, no-strings-attached money-back guarantee, would you be interested? Get a free copy of The Power That Heals, Sampling the Wisdom by Concept Theory founder Dr. Thurman Fleet. Visit concept-theory.org/free book. Or call toll-free 1-800-531-5628. It's time to live again, isn't it? You do have a choice.
Tagged Your It, Become the Leader of Your Own Life takes you on a journey of 8 life mastery skills that will help you step into your power and become the leader of your own life. Inspiring, real, insightful, and therapeutic, these pages help you discover deeper awareness, understanding, and relationship with yourself and others. Start to live a life that is full, joyful, and on purpose with peace. Give yourself permission to live life through your authentic self. These steps can be used in your personal, professional, and social life. Tagged Your It, Become the Leader of Your Own Life. Available on Amazon. Get your copy today. Hey everybody, welcome back to Awaken Your Truth with me, RiTika Rose, and my co-host, Azure Darby. We hope the first segment of the show was supportive and helpful for you around learning how to detach and surrender and some of our personal experiences through the conversation. And, now we just want to sort of jump into why do people experience attachment, right? Where does this all come from? Right? And how can we start to overcome it? And I think a lot of attachment, right, Azure, comes from fear.
Absolutely.
The need to control, the lack of trust, ego, which fear is ego, right? A lot of it is learned behavior from our families and our societies, and some of my notes here, it's like it comes from the focus of suffering, right? The attachment to what you want that you don't have, or what you have that you don't want, is really what the attachment is, right? And that's where the suffering is coming from. It's like, what do you want that you don't have, right? Or what is it that you have right now that you don't want? And there's that attachment around it, right? And how do you let it go? How do you let it go, either to bring in what you need, or how do you let go of what you have that you don't want, right? And that suffering around those thought processes is, holds us in this place of attachment instead of letting it go. Is that making sense what I'm saying? Or do you want to elaborate on that? Instead of letting it go and surrendering to, if we take action to manifest what we're looking for, what we're seeking, then it can come in fruition in the time that it's meant to, or even if it's meant to. And that's where the trust comes in. It's sort of and sorry, not to jump off of what you and I are talking about today, but for those that watched the show with Grace 2 weeks ago about 2022, it's a year of trust in action, right? This is also a really nice piggyback from that show, right? Because this year is all about trust, which is the hardest thing to do, and taking action. But it is the taking action and the trust part that helps us, again, in the process of surrendering.
Absolutely.
Right?
Right.
Attachment.
Right. I think that, and you're right, you talked about things that create attachment, and you also talked about how it's a learned behavior. We're not just taught by our parents, we're taught by society at large in terms of how to move through the world, how to handle things, how to get what you want. And we're very much of a society that's about getting what you want. Right. And going after it and crushing it and all of these things.
And we're also taught that.
That's what I'm saying. We're taught by society. Yeah, we're taught by society at large, which, seeps into our familial systems and, and then seeps into us as being the way in which we need to go about things. But I think it's that energy, because you even feel the energy of what I'm saying to you. It's go, it's like that versus more of a sort of relaxed sort of trust, allowing. That's not what we're taught. We're taught that you have to be intense and you have to, put everything into it. And I think that creates that fear, that creates that intense, sometimes anxiety for people around getting what you want. And then also too, what we're taught about getting what we want, what that then means for us or about us, right? So
Mhm.
sometimes when people are in that energy of I'm not getting what I want, then they're reflecting on what does that say about me or what does that mean about me, right? So that could then create negative feelings. So we have to sort of be mindful of that, that when we're thinking about attachment and how to undo that or how to, kind of move forward, it's a lot of unlearning that has to go into that, because that's probably not what you're seeing, or what you're doing, excuse me, is probably a part of what you're seeing from your
Right.
parents, from, people in your family, from society at large. You've been taught that this is how you do it, that you have to attack it, you have to, be really intense about it, versus, taking the action that you feel is necessary to take. And then, kind of not throwing your hands up, but allowing, not gripping, but allowing for it to come. And like you said, in the way in which it's meant to, and in the timing in which it's meant to.
Right. And
Yeah,
that's our human experience.
exactly.
That's
That's
our
all humanness.
that's all, yes, that's all our humanness at play, right?
Yeah.
And that's where we tend to forget. So then, that
Hmm.
again, remembering that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. So let's
That
talk
part.
on that for a minute. Because once
Hmm.
we remember, right, that we're spiritual beings having a human experience, a lot of the suffering and attachment can start to subside itself, right? We can always step
Right.
into, those of us that have done deep spiritual work, like you and I, and probably many others listening, we've really come to this understanding and awareness of life, of like who we are. But it doesn't mean that we
Hmm.
don't step into our humanness sometimes, because it happens, right? I mean, we're
Right.
living in this, in the world, right? With the worldly possessions and all the worldly things,
Hmm.
but we have to remember that this was all a creation from above, right? So during my spiritual awakening, one of the most profound things that I heard through my meditation and my prayers was, and I've talked about this a lot in the show, and even in the beginning of my book, is, source is something, I created you, right? You are a creation from me. Our only experience that we're really meant to have down here is love and joy. Why was the earth created? Why were we all created? We were created
Hmm.
out of love, so we could love, right? The creator
Hmm.
just wanted to see his people down here living joyfully and peacefully, right? He created us from him, right? But it's all the human experiences and all the worldly things that we have that sort of create the jadedness, or the ego and the fear that we experience, right?
Hmm.
But once we remember that
Hmm.
we're actually a spiritual being, created from love, created from joy, actually it's supposed to be experiencing full freedom, right? Then we can ask ourselves, well,
Hmm.
why are we suffering? Why are we allowing ourselves to suffer, right?
Hmm. Yeah. Well, we even talked about that a little bit last week. We talked about pain, right? And suffering. And we talked about how, it's usually information for us when we're experiencing pain, which can lead to suffering. It's not so we can just sort of wallow in that and be victim to that. It's information for us. It's telling us that
Yes.
we've somehow lost,
Yes.
we're probably not in tune with that connection to source, right? We're not
Right.
in tune with what it is that spirit is seeking to tell us through this experience, right? And attachment is a surefire way to experience pain and suffering, because it does sort of speak to that, because we're always connected whether we know it or not, but it's being tuned into the connection. So
Mhm.
when we're sort of creating separation by being too overly attached to an outcome or a certain way that something is, supposed to go, or something that we desire, we are sort of in essence creating suffering, through that separation from, like you said, at what's at its core is about being in love. I mean, experiencing love in this world,
Yeah.
right? And just giving and receiving that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And my show was called Awaken Your Truth, on very much on purpose, because it was
Hmm.
it's very spiritually thought out, because awaken your truth really means, it is awakening the truth to who you are and remembering who you are.
Hmm.
And the
Your
truth,
spiritual truth, your inner truth. Yeah.
yep, the truth of who you are is that you are whole and one, always. This is how we were created. We were created whole. There was never really supposed to be any separation from source, right?
Hmm.
Because we're a child of source. right? So when we
Exactly.
forget that or we separate ourselves from that, then that's where we find attachments in other things.
And can I also say to that,
Yeah.
because you identified a few things that keep us attached, right? Or you talked about the lack of trust, you talked about fear, right? And that's exactly that. That's exactly the thing, that if we remember our oneness with Source, with Creator, then we realize that the power that Source and Creator holds, so do we. So if you
Right.
truly know and believe that and you understand that, then you don't have to get all bogged down and fearful about when things are coming or how they're showing up, because you know how powerful you are.
Right.
And you know that you have the power to co-create, with Source, that which you desire. So if we focus on that, then that, attachment to outcome and how things show up, it definitely helps that to dissipate, in my estimation, in my experience.
Yeah. And I think what we were tapping on a few minutes ago about, or in the first segment about having contracts, right? So I'm going to tap into this a little bit. So
Okay.
In spiritual teachings, we're taught that before we come down and take place on this earth, we've made a contract with Source above of what our life is going to be like, right? What is our mission? What is our purpose? What is our life mission and lessons, right? That we are contracted to when we come and we agree to come down into human form, right? That being said, when we talk about our personal life, our professional life, our social life, right? There's so many things we can take a look at, and the suffering, the challenges that we face in all of those areas, but then now taking this really important information about surrendering and detaching and placing it into those areas, because all of this is happening on purpose. So all the people that are come into your life, personally, professionally, socially, are not on accident.
Right.
Every single one of us has been contracted to meet each other. Whoever's been in your world, in your life, have been contracted to meet each other on purpose, right? We're all here to serve one another, to teach one another, for the time that we're meant to do it, right? And then when it's time to finally, when that journey is done with that individual, then it's done with that individual.
Right. We're actors in a play, if you will, and there are different acts in that play.
Yeah.
Right. And some people are showing up for different parts.
Yes.
Different acts in your play.
Sometimes they're going to be there our whole life. Sometimes they're going to be there just for the portions of our life. So like when we're attached to people, right? Or we're attached to things, right? So like, we can just say, dip into some things like personally, we're attached to marriage. We're attached to our spouses. We're attached to not letting our kids leave from home. We're attached from finding that partner. We're attached to this car, this home, this city we want to live in, et cetera, right? So let's just remember that everyone and everything has come into place for the time that it's supposed to be there, right? If it's time to move on, it's time to move on. If it's not time to move on and it's yours for the keeping, then it's yours for the keeping, because that's part of the contract. That's part of your spiritual, the spiritual experience, right? Professionally, I mean, jobs can come and go, decisions may not always go your way, results may not always happen the way that it's supposed to, but how do you respond and react to those things? Can you find peace in it and just say, okay, that wasn't meant to be at this time? Or do you fight for you to be heard and for your decision to go forward, XYZ? Does that make sense? Because sometimes people can do that, right? And that's coming from ego and fear. Or can you just say, okay, I did the best that I could,
right,
to make my mark, to say what I needed to say, to sort of propel this decision or what have you. And if it didn't happen, it didn't happen. And if it did, then it was meant to be, right? And even socially, like, sometimes, being attached to groups or circles or people in our lives, like sometimes when do we really need to take a look at, all right, it's time to just separate myself from this person or detach from this person, right? If they're not serving us in that way anymore, in a healthy way that's aligned with us, et cetera. I mean, I can go on and on about these examples, but hopefully some of this reflection is supportive to the audience. Azure, you want to tap into any of this?
Well, I know we're running out of time, but I
Yeah.
would love to, when we could, I have a lot of thoughts I would love to
Okay.
sort of tag on to what you just shared
Okay.
regarding that.
When we come back from
Absolutely.
commercial. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. And so great. So we'll go to commercial break now. And then when we come back, we'll talk about, how do we let go of some of these things? Some of the things we just talked
Hmm.
about. How do we actually trust in the process of surrendering, and allowing that to happen? So, and just remembering that, we are co-creators in this life with above, and we'll discuss that more when we come back. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll be back soon.
If we could help you transcend your post-traumatic stress experience without drugs, grow in awareness of why you're suffering the experience, and offer you a solid, no-strings-attached money-back guarantee, would you be interested? Get a free copy of The Power That Heals, Sampling the Wisdom by Concept Theory founder Dr. Thurman Fleet. Visit concept-theory.org/free book. Or call toll-free 1-800-531-5628. It's time to live again, isn't it? You do have a choice.
Tagged Your It, Become the Leader of Your Own Life takes you on a journey of 8 life mastery skills that will help you step into your power and become the leader of your own life. Inspiring, real, insightful, and therapeutic, these pages help you discover deeper awareness, understanding, and relationship with yourself and others. Start to live a life that is full, joyful, and on purpose with peace. Give yourself permission to live life through your authentic self. These steps can be used in your personal, professional, and social life. Tagged Your It, Become the Leader of Your Own Life. Available on Amazon. Get your copy today. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Awaken Your Truth with me, RiTika Rose, and my co-host today, Azure Darby. And she has a lot to say based on what I was just saying, but she's like, you know what? I don't have time to go into this before commercial, so I'm going to just throw it straight over to her so she can share her thoughts.
Thank you,
Yeah,
sis.
you're welcome.
So yes, everything what you were saying just absolutely resonated with me, and I know we're going to talk within this within the final segment. We're going to talk about how do you surrender and how do you practice detachment, and what you talked about in terms of remembering that we are incarnating, right, multiple times for many of us, onto this planet, and we're showing up, like you said, with this sort of divine assignment already sort of agreed upon. And soulmates that show up in our lives, because soulmates are not just romantic partners. Soulmates are you and I are soulmates in my estimation, and
100%.
100%, right? And family members and our romantic loves as well can be soulmates. And like you said, we've all agreed to sort of show up in a certain way. So even when you are experiencing disappointments, when you are experiencing challenges, the pain that we talked about, some of the suffering, I oftentimes will remind myself that, first of all, I signed up for this. I'm not a victim because I agreed to come here and to do what it is that I'm doing. So even when, I have an experience with someone that maybe didn't go the way I would have liked it to go consciously in this worldly sense, right? I remember, oh, you're more than likely doing what you and I agreed to do with each other, right? We're following our assignment. The kids say, I understood the assignment, right? That's what it is right? That's essentially what it is, right? Is remembering that, okay, everything that we come here to do in the lives of other people may not always look, at first glance positive, right? But it doesn't mean that it doesn't help us to grow, to elevate, to ascend, to get to the next level. So I find that remembering that, and that's that, like you said, tapping into being a spiritual being versus sort of holding on to the humanness all the time. When I do that, I find myself better able to navigate through the challenges by remembering, like, oh, okay, this is a part of the plan. This is part of the play. This is this act in my sort of human incarnation play that's taking place. All right, what's next? Or what am I to learn from that? And sort of taking that and moving forward with it. I find that incredibly helpful.
Yeah.
When I can get out of the human, the human space of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And as you were talking, the soulmate point is so important because and again, it's sort of piggybacking on what I was saying before commercial, that everybody comes into our life for a reason. So let's remember, like, 100%, I have met some of my friends who are my soulmates through work. Some of my work colleagues back like from 20 years ago, right, are my soulmates. Like I just knew, like there's that instant connection. and
Mm-hmm.
bam, you're just friends. And sometimes you don't even know how or why, but it's just like, it's just that we're so connected. And there's
Yeah.
just that automatic, and unconditional acceptance and love for each other, regardless of anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
soulmate, right? You and I met 10 years ago, 10 or 11 years
Mm-hmm.
ago, because, we were diving more into our spirituality and self-awareness, and
Right.
spiritual teachings, and bam, it was just like,
Yeah.
out of everybody in those classes and groups that we were in, you and
Yeah.
I are the ones that have been constant, constantly
Right.
been in touch for 10 or 11 years. Everyone else has sort
Right.
of fallen away,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's like, so for the audience, it's like just remembering that, right? Like, we are all contracted with each other for different reasons. As some of the people that you've contracted to meet are going to be your soulmates, friends, romantic partners, family members, your spouses, your children,
Mm-hmm.
etc. Right? And some
Mm-hmm.
are just going to be there for that reason or that season, like
That's
that
right.
quote says, and and so that's all part of our contract, right? So it's like, so
Mm-hmm.
now, how do we let go? Let's talk about how we are actually part of the universe. How are we creating with the universe? I'm just looking at some of my
Mm-hmm.
notes here. You talked about, we put out there what we desire, and get back.
Yeah.
We tapped on this a little bit earlier in the show, but I put this in my notes too, is like listening to those nudges, right? Listening to your nudges, that's your
Mm-hmm.
hint for the next step, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or
Mm-hmm.
it's also a hint to not take the next step, right?
That
Because
part.
attachment comes in different things. It's like, what do we want that we don't
Mm-hmm.
have, but what do we have that we don't want, right? So maybe you
Mm-hmm.
want something so bad, but maybe that's just like an earthly human thing based on your learned behaviors,
Exactly.
learn from your human experience. But if it's not coming to you and you keep getting these nudges, you're keep somehow the universe or your guides keep sending you a different direction, pay attention to that, right? Because maybe that thing that you
Right.
want is not meant for you, but it's a protection for you, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
protecting you.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to identify what I'm wearing today, because everything I do is very purposeful, right? So spirituality, spiritual beings having a human experience, spirituality comes in so many different forms. So let's all remember that as brothers and sisters, right? People may what's the word? May move towards a different religion or spiritual practice than others, right? We all have
Mm-hmm.
our different spiritual practices or religions that we follow, etc. There's no judgment on that, whatever your relationship is to source. But like, for example, today I did this very purposely, because spirituality, spiritual beings having a human experience. The shawl I'm wearing is a hamsa. This comes from the Middle East. I am not Middle Eastern, I'm Indian, but this comes from the Middle East. When the hamsa is facing upward, the reason why I thought of this just now, because I said protection, when it's facing upward,
Mm-hmm.
it's representing how source in the universe is protecting you. This is a protection, and the
Mm-hmm.
eye in between, the evil eye, right? Protecting us from
Mm-hmm.
anything negative. When it's facing downward, it symbolizes the universe and all the goodness the universe has to offer us, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is just a symbol of Middle East. I'm wearing my angel wings, right? That's also
Mm-hmm.
showing that I'm in direct connection with divine source, reminding me of who I am and that I'm protected by the angels, right?
Mm-hmm.
This piece that I wear here reminds me that I'm a spiritual teacher. I bought this for myself back in the day when I was, in a wellness conference that I was serving as a Reiki practitioner, and the energy just shot through my body the minute I put it on. And just whenever I wear this, it reminds me of who I am. So, point is, spirituality comes in so many different forms. It's how you choose to practice it and how you choose to be in connection with it, right? But remembering that so when we can get into this conversation about co-creating with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how are we part of the universe? So Jordy, you want to jump into that?
I do. So we are talking about, we're reminding ourselves, first of all, that we are spiritual beings. We're reminding ourselves of the connection that we hold with Source and the power that that connection holds, within us personally and throughout the world. And I think utilizing that, I like the idea of remembering that we're not separate, meaning that we're not alone in our desires, first of all, and in the creation of those or the manifestation of those desires. So I love the idea of just remembering our divine, our divinity and the use of our spirit guides, the ascendant masters, whoever it is that, encompasses your sort of divinity team, if you will, or divine support that helps along with the process of creating the life of your dreams, or the life that you desire to have. That that's not a singular, individual, independent process, that we are doing that with the universe. We're manifesting with the universe. And I think a large part of that, or a way to remember that, is to take the time to, we've talked about this, meditate. Because that's how we stay in that connection. That's how we stay in tune. Being so human and of the world, you have society, you have television, you have social media telling you things. And it's really important to get to a place where you can quiet those outward voices and hear, you know, the inner voice, and have that connect to source. And that, I think, that is a major tool in helping us with creating what we desire, and also being okay with how that shows up, the timing, and all those things that we've been talking about.
Yeah. All of these things we just talked about is the spiritual tools. And maybe when we come back from break, we can talk a little bit more about the spiritual tools. So even what I just shared about you right now, I mean, being very purposeful in what I'm wearing today, right? These are just tools to remind us of who we are. Right. And that's why you'll see a lot of people wearing different things, you know, different jewelry, or, you know, clothing, or what have you, or carrying crystals, you know, the act and art of meditation in so many different ways. And just, these are all the things that can remind you, if you're feeling challenged, or if you're feeling, you know, attached to something, just remembering these tools that you have for you that can just remind you of who you are. You really are that spiritual being, and you can surrender, letting it go and surrendering. And this is sometimes it's very helpful for people to have these tools, you know, or these little reminders around them, so you can continue to find that peace and joy, and know that it's around you, right? Right.
Yeah.
So when we come back from break, we can I'll read a little bit more from the chapter of detachment, and we'll end the show with some further tips. So thank you all for listening. We'll be right back.
If we could help you transcend your post-traumatic stress experience without drugs, grow in awareness of why you're suffering the experience, and offer you a solid, no-strings-attached money-back guarantee, would you be interested? Get a free copy of The Power That Heals, Sampling the Wisdom by Concept Theory founder Dr. Thurman Fleet. Visit concept-theory.org/free book, or call toll-free 1-800-531-5628. It's time to live again, isn't it? You do have a choice.
Tagged Your It, Become the Leader of Your Own Life takes you on a journey of 8 life mastery skills that will help you step into your power and become the leader of your own life. Inspiring, real, insightful, and therapeutic, these pages help you discover deeper awareness, understanding, and relationship with yourself and others. Start to live a life that is full, joyful, and on purpose, with peace. Give yourself permission to live life through your authentic self. These steps can be used in your personal, professional, and social life. Tagged Your It, Become the Leader of Your Own Life. Available on Amazon. Get your copy today. Welcome back to Awaken Your Truth with me, RiTika Rose, and my special co-host, Azure Darby. I'm going to jump right into this segment, reading a couple more paragraphs from my book, from the chapter of detachment. And once again, if you want to read the full book and learn how to find more peace and joy and fulfillment in your life and become the leader of your own life, please visit Amazon and Tagged Your It, Become the Leader of Your Own Life, or RiTikaRose.com, and all the information's there for you to get and order your book. So here we go. Detaching for me was going into meditation or prayer, asking my God source and angels to help me, guide me, or bring in what it is that I was seeking. I would continue to work on it on my behalf while allowing the universe to work alongside with me, and literally let it go, knowing all would manifest itself in divine timing. When I began to practice the process of detachment and I allowed things to manifest as they were, I kid you not, every single time that I've done this, things have manifested themselves in perfect time, order, and perfectly how it was supposed to be. Now, this is really important. If any of it manifested earlier or later, the situation or myself would not have been ready for it at that time. Right? So now we're going to throw it back over to Azure and to talk about, the co-creation piece a little bit further. and,
Mm-hmm.
the surrendering process.
Right. So I was sharing, we were talking before, and I was sharing with you that one of the things that sort of gives me solace when it comes to manifesting or, coming, connecting with my desires is that I am not creating this life, or I'm not doing this life alone. Like, not only do I have you and friends, other friends and family, etc., I also have spirit. I have the universe that's working with me to create this life, paying attention to all of these experiences that I'm having, giving me these experiences to help me navigate through life and learn the necessary lessons. So that's really what co-creation is about for me, is just reminding me that I'm not alone in this. That first, reminding myself that I'm not separate from spirit, and that we are creating this life together. And how powerful is that? So by, doing the work to first of all be clear on what it is I desire, but like we talked about, to trust that, how that shows up, when that shows up, all of that has to do with spirit knowing me so well. And like you said, knowing when I'm ready for certain experiences, knowing when I'm ready to let other experiences go. I just love the idea. I feel like if it were just me moving through this world, by myself, and I didn't have that powerful connection, how, that would just, that would not be exciting. That would not be the kind of existence that I would want to have. And so that remembrance for me is exciting, and it's also reassuring, in those moments where I'm in my humanness and I'm thinking, well, why don't I have that yet? Or why doesn't it look like that yet? And
Yeah.
I'm doing all of that. And like,
And am I really supposed to have it?
Right. Well, I feel like I trust if I'm meant to have it, it's coming.
Yeah, it will.
So right. So then, we don't even have to go through all of that.
Yeah. But I think part of the surrendering too is like, if we don't have it, right, is also just, I think, remember, for people that are feeling very challenged about not having what they're desiring, is just remembering that your contract, you're a spiritual being, right? Maybe it's not supposed to happen. And hopefully that can help you find some peace, right? But if it is, it will happen in the time that it's supposed to.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that could be important for people, because people may not fully know what their contract is, and they may not fully know what they agreed to do. But I think it is trusted. But I also believe too, that if you're given the desire, we're given desires for a reason. Right. So I feel like if the desire is there, that means that there's that potential to have that experience in your life. But like we've been talking about, it may just not look the way that, I think that's the part.
Okay.
It just may not show up or look the way we think it is. We may just go, oh, wait a minute. Have you ever had that experience where maybe something showed up and it just took you a minute to go, and you did this on my 40th birthday? Well, I'll hold that. But what? I had an idea of how I wanted something to be or look, and you were like, look, Azure, you got this. And I said, oh, well, you were like, but you got it.
I did. Yeah, I'm gonna have to remind me that story.
Right, I'll remind you. But it was a perfect example of that, because I wanted it to look a certain way, and it didn't show up the way I thought it was, but it did show up. And you absolutely reminded me of that. And I went, okay, touche, sis, touche. But I think that's exactly what we're talking about. It's just that divine, that utter trust, that how it's showing up, the timing and all of that really has to do with the universe knowing you so well, knowing you better than you know yourself, and knowing, like you said, what we signed up to do and to experience in this incarnation.
Yeah. I think a few important points as you were talking that came to me was one, our connection to source, right? So you and I have both talked about meditation, how important that is, right?
Right. It's
paramount. And I mean, people meditate for different reasons, and people have different experiences with meditation, right?
Some types of meditation.
Yep. And so like when I do my healing services and I do meditation for my clients, at my spiritual center, people, the congregation, they come because they just want to find peace and relaxation. For you and I, when we go into meditation to connect to source and receive the information we need to receive. So there's different forms of communication there, right? If we can get to a point of meditating where you are actually in that co-creation with source, right? You're actually in that conversation and that communication with source, to help guide you on your next steps or to help you find the peace that you're seeking, that could be a very beautiful experience for you. I think another really important thing, just like at the top of the show, I talked about, I was feeling challenged, but I threw it out there. I threw it out there to the producers. I threw it out there to you. I threw it out to the universe, but I also asked for support, right? I asked Jessica, what do you think? I didn't necessarily ask you, but you just came back to me and said, well, I can support you on this, because I was being honest about how I was feeling.
Support you?
Right. And I think another really important point to make about being in co-creation is ask and you shall receive.
That's huge. That is so huge.
Massive.
You have to invite.
Yeah.
Right. We talk about like our angels, our guides, even spirit. We have to invite that energy in to assist us and support us. Because if we're just moving around thinking it's just us, free will is a thing,
Oh yeah.
And hands will be thrown up and allowed for us to just kind of figure this out on our own if we don't want, and desire and invite in that support. I wanted to touch on something too that we just talked about with the desire piece, because I do think it's important to remember, because we talked about how society sort of conditions us to become attached, and that comes from a lot of different places. Discernment with regards to, and I think it goes back to what you said, how some things may not be meant to be. I think when it comes to our desires, I absolutely believe that they're given to us for a reason, but discernment around those desires, that desire coming from my heart, from my soul, from my spirit, or is that coming from some outside influence that tells me that this is how I'm supposed to be, or how I'm supposed to look or show up, or this is what I'm supposed to have in order to feel successful? I think the discernment piece within that is also important. So I wanted to put that in there.
Please, and I'm so grateful for that, because that's sort of exactly how I wanted to end the show too, because that was really coming to me also, right? Because a big part of Awaken Your Truth with me is that perspective piece, right? It's really, I really want to help my audience and the people that listen to the show feel grounded and peaceful emotionally, mentally, physically, and very holistically in all aspects of their life. I want them to feel confident and comfortable in their own skin and who they are. And I want to help society see other people in different ways. So when we're talking about free your mind, heal your life, embody your power, and these conscious dialogues I'm having with you and other people, let's remember this discernment piece and this desire piece, right? And and the surrendering and letting go. Again, I always sort of end the show with the same thing. Like, there is nothing wrong with you, right? It's your life is on contract the way your life is supposed to be. You're a spiritual being having a human experience. You're not a human being trying to find a spiritual path, which yes, people are doing, but once they get to that path and the work is done, you realize that you're actually that spiritual being having a human experience. So then the perspective shifts, right? Does that make sense? I know that it's a little deeper and it may be a little bit off, but I really want the audience to get that, right? So you are perfect and whole 100%.
I'm so glad you're saying that,
because spirit and source has created you that way, has created each of us that way. If you don't have what you want, or you don't have what society wants of you or for you, XYZ, it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. Please, please, please understand that. This is your journey, right? It's your journey with source above. What was contracted to you and for you? Now, remember, again, we talk about this over and over again in my show. Nothing's being done to you. It's happening for you. What is that contract? Can you find your spiritual tools and your spiritual practices that align with you? It's very individual and very personal for everybody. What are those spiritual practices and spiritual tools that align with you, that help you stay connected to your higher power, whoever and whatever that is for you, right? So you can hear those messages, so you can find your peace and your grounding in knowing that you're being guided and protected every day, all the time, right? And this is your journey, and this is your path, very much so on purpose. But as Azure said, there's also free will. So pay attention to the discernment around the decisions you're making, right? Because free will means we can do whatever we want, regardless of the nudges we're getting, regardless of how we're being guided. We can do whatever we want. And when we do whatever we want, then maybe that's where we're starting to feel the challenges in life and where our suffering is coming into play. So we are at time for the show, but hopefully those last thoughts were beneficial for the audience and for those listening. Remember that or I can go on and on. Sure. Do you have any last thoughts? I said so much.
Yes, I think again, just reminding ourselves that detachment or surrender can be challenging initially, but quite honestly, when you practice it, it actually makes life so much easier when you do it. I'm telling you, there's a peace that will wash over you when you learn the power of surrender.
Yep.
I just can't emphasize that enough.
And it takes
Just
practice. So
it does
please
take practice.
Find the practice that aligns with you. I'm here to support you personally. So please go to RiTikaRose.com and click on that free consultation button. So we can work together and see how I can support you best. Please order the book, Tagged You're It, Become the Leader of Your Own Life, to hear the 8 life mastery skills that I teach, and really empowering your spiritual self and this experience you're having here on earth. And and thank you again for listening. I thank you so much, Azure, for being my co-host again.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, I love you dearly, and thank you so much for your support and being here and all the wisdom and knowledge you bring too. It's so great to have these spiritual conversations with you and support so many people. So thank you everybody for listening, and see you in February. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to Awaken Your Truth with me, RiTika Rose. I hope that you heard something today that sparked a shift in your perspective to free your mind, heal your life, and embody your power. The world needs love, acceptance, togetherness, and belonging. My hope is to be a contributing force towards the new world we need to create together. If each of us can awaken our truth and live with more empathy and authenticity, that shift will radiate. Spread the word and tune in next time for more conscious dialogues of healing and transformation on Transformation Talk Radio and Awaken Your Truth with RiTika Rose on YouTube and across all podcast stations. For more information about how to work with me, please visit RiTikaRose.com.